Leaders who are continuously physically active, leaders who are rested, leaders who are nourished, leaders who take the time to reflect. Those leaders forge deeper relationships with the people around them, with their stakeholders, with their peers, with their employees. They make more accurate decisions. They express more creativity. They learn more quickly. They feel happier. And it's not only that they feel happier at work, they feel happier at home.
Welcome to What's Possible, where leadership thrives. I'm Eileen Schaefer, and I'm glad you're here. Behind every powerhouse communicator and relationship builder is a strategic thinker who leads with curiosity. Because of that, we believe that your journey to become the best leader possible starts with you. Success rhetoric often sounds like this: cultivate the brain, have a growth mindset, sharpen your memory, leverage your intellect. It's all from the neck up. What if I told you there's more to that equation? Today, we're talking about one of your biggest resources, your body. Lisa Zigarmi is an organizational psychologist, executive coach, and frequent contributor to the Harvard Business Review and Forbes. She also prioritizes a conscious relationship with her body by incorporating movement, sleep, and nutrition into her daily routines. She shares this wisdom with her clients because it improves decision-making, relationships, creativity, and it can even prevent burnout. Lisa is here to share what happens when we tune into our bodies and direct that intentional energy into our work. I'm Eileen Schaefer. Let's find out what's possible. Welcome, Lisa. I'm so happy that you're here, and I can't wait to learn from you.
Thanks, Eileen. I'm glad to be here. And as you were doing that introduction, I was just aware of what was happening in my body. I am feeling really activated, really alive, really nervous. And I was sort of thinking to myself, okay, what am I going to do with this? And we're going to talk about that today.
I love it. And I'm curious, where in your body were you feeling that?
I was really feeling it in my torso. So really like everything from my gut up into my heart, and I think that that's because I care about this topic so deeply and I want to convey relevant and useful information to people. And so I was like, wow, I'm really activated about this. I hope I can deliver.
Well, you and I, so just a sneak peek into the podcast world, Lisa and I had a false start yesterday because of technical challenges. And so we ended up having a phenomenal conversation, not recorded, regarding the body. And the things that you were sharing, Lisa, they're just it's so spot on. There are things that we don't think about. And so I'm thrilled that you are here today and you have a wealth of knowledge that you use obviously for yourself, which I always love hearing that, as well as with all your clients.
Thanks, Eileen. Yeah, the body really is overlooked, underappreciated in the context of leadership, I think. And it's really funny because there's no action that can be taken without the body. So it's this silent player. And I think it's time that we sort of bring it into the conversation. When people are promoted and when they're going to develop their leadership, when they're working with a coach, oftentimes they're not thinking to themselves, what do I need to do with and for my body in order to be in this new position, right? Yeah. Or in order to be a better, more effective leader. And so I think it's time we talk about that.
Yeah, bring it front and center. So before we dive in, just hearing you say that you could feel it in your body, what is maybe one calming thing that we could do? Because I think it'd be great to share with our listeners one thing that might help all of us get grounded in this moment.
Well, we did it. We noticed. So I actually already feel differently. I don't know if you do, but I noticed and I revealed my humanity. Our feelings are body. So our body and our feelings are the same. Feelings are cycles that happen in our body that are hormonal and neurological. And, they have beginnings, middles, and ends. And I just had a little one, right? And I noticed it. I didn't judge it. I allowed my humanity to show up in the podcast. And I think that's one thing people can do. They can permit their feelings.
I love that because I kind of feel like there's so many things that are complex and people are already overwhelmed with everything we need to do and learn and how to be in life. And then you listen to something like this, you're like, oh, right, now I need to do that on top of everything else.
Right.
And what you're saying is at its core so simple, noticing. So if we just take that pause and notice,
Right.
and then oftentimes when we share and we get it out of our mind and out of our body and put it
Right.
out there, that makes
Right.
it not so big, bad, and ugly.
Right.
And I want to just highlight, I always talk about bringing out my big fluorescent highlighter, but you did it without judgment because that's when I
Right.
think it takes us down a path that's not great.
I think what we also shared together here was a moment of connection versus one of protection. And that's a body language too. And we can talk about that. And ultimately, isn't that really what leading is? Like leading is relating, leading is connecting, not only ideas and strategy to, a person's day-to-day behaviors, but also their hearts to the purpose of the work, and connecting human to human. And that doesn't happen, without the body.
Let's take 1 minute to back up because then we are going to dive super deep into the body and how that is connected to leadership. You've been in the leadership development space for many, many, many years, even though you don't look like you possibly could have done it for many, many, many years. I do know that you have. And you're an organizational psychologist. What brought you into this space in the first place, just even outside of the body piece of it?
Well, I am the daughter of two organizational psychologists, and I've always deeply appreciated their work. I've gotten to see the power of building self-awareness in people and building contextual awareness. And I'm also an athlete or a former athlete. And so I feel like there's an opportunity for me to bring a little bit of myself in here too. I'm interested in that self-awareness, and the situational awareness that my parents spent their whole careers studying. And I think a big part of self-awareness, now that I'm recognizing this, is really body awareness, emotional awareness. And that's what's got me interested in this topic.
Absolutely. And particularly, I know you're someone who has really gotten deep into a variety of topics. I do admire you for often being ahead of your time with whatever you're studying. Your curiosity drives you forward, even when sometimes the science hasn't even gotten there as quickly as you've gotten there and you've noticed. So I really admire that in you. And talking about the body connection, we're just not seeing it as much yet, but I see it coming soon.
It's coming. It's coming. We're starting to understand, I think, the role of our central nervous system in how we show up. It's sort of an intervening variable. We have the stimulus, we have our central nervous system response to that stimulus, and then we have our actions, our behaviors, our thoughts, our feelings, right? And that central nervous system response is something I'm deeply interested in. And you're right, it's kind of like emerging research. And I think we're going to get a lot of good juice from that squeeze, but we're early in understanding, what does that really mean? And from what I can sort of say so far, it's that our bodies, our central nervous systems were designed to keep us alive. And they sense very quickly threat or safety. And so the response that our central nervous system has to a stimulus really dictates the quality of our energy, the quality of our experience when it's unprocessed, right? So am I looking at the situation feeling activated, or am I looking at it feeling threatened? Am I looking at it with this sense of growth and possibility, or am I looking at it from a place of deep, dark dread?
Sure.
And that really directs the quality of our energy and how we can show up not only for ourselves, but for other people. And that's the job of a leader.
When you say activated, I think people can think of, almost thinking triggered. And I'm hearing the opposite. When you say activated, you mean it in a positive way. You're activated and engaged? Or
Activated and engaged is how I would use that. Triggered for me would be something else. It would be dysregulated. That was a really good sort of clarification. I think, to come back to this idea of the body, I just really think that modern conditioning in general, Eileen, has made leading this thinking endeavor, right? And yet really our body is our primary vehicle to sensing, to acting, and to relating to other people. And so, you can't lead well if you're numb or if you're threatened or if you're isolated. And said another way, you cannot lead effectively if you're underslept, if you're undernourished, or if you're emotionally dysregulated, as I said earlier.
And it is interesting how many of our leaders are underslept. That I would say is top of the list for our organization. And Lisa does do coaching through SVC. We're working with the senior leaders in organizations, and the demands are so intense, and people often trade in sleep for getting one more thing done. And as I was actually talking to a leader about this the other day, because we always set goals around well-being with SVC clients. And I was using that example of, would you want your, whatever doctor to think, let me just stay up until 3 a.m. doing X, Y, and Z, and then I'll wake up at, 6 or whatever and operate. No, thank you. Please get a good night's sleep. So we know objectively that that's not okay. And our doctor is not going to do his best surgery or her best surgery when they are underslept. But somehow we think we're going to do our best work, when we're operating off 3-4 hours of sleep. And no, it just doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. It's just a false narrative, right? That getting something else done is a good trade for less sleep. Like it doesn't work. It doesn't make leaders as effective as they want to be. It lowers their self-regulation, makes them less accurate in their decision-making, less creative. I mean, we can go on and on about the effects of not having enough sleep. And I think it's shocking for most people. They don't want to admit it. We have this culture of overperformance where people are like, oh, I can exist on 6 hours of sleep. And the truth is that most human beings, most bodies need 8. They need 8, sometimes 9 hours of sleep in order to really process and integrate the day, integrate the feelings that they've had, digest their food. Yeah, it's just part of being human and not a machine.
I'm curious along those lines, because you do work with super high performers. How do you get them to start thinking about that emotion-body connection? Because oftentimes they're coming to you with more heady stuff. I need to be more strategic. I need to know how to manage this situation. How do you integrate it?
It's a really good question. How do I integrate that? I really believe that I've started to care as deeply about how someone feels as to what they think. And I think if you were to just look at the profundity of that statement, in business life, we are taught to check our feelings at the door, right? We're taught don't bring it into the room. And that's just, not only is it impossible because we're human beings that dually process in our brains thought and emotion an emotion is a physiological response that's involuntary and we can't stop it. It's impossible not to feel as a human being. Right. But we've sort of been conditioned to think that our thoughts are more legitimate than our feelings. And what I try to do is walk that back with people. So I care deeply about what you want to accomplish, what's on your mind, what you're thinking about. But I also care deeply or equally as sort of reverently about how you're feeling about that how you are relating to the objectives that you have in front of you, from what energy source, with what motivation. And I think just framing it like that for leaders gives them it sort of like breaks the conditioning cycle for just a minute where they're like, oh, well, how am I feeling? I don't know how I'm feeling. A lot of them are feeling numb, right? Like burnout is like bigger than ever before. People are feeling really taxed. They haven't rested. So sometimes they don't even know how they're feeling. And sometimes they respond honestly with a thought about how they're feeling.
What I love about you opening that door for your clients is then they very possibly take that back to their teams or to their one-on-ones to start to ask some of the people, how are you feeling, versus staying in the head with the people who they're managing or peers or what have you. Because I think as we start to experience that feeling body connection ourselves, hopefully it's contagious within our organizations. Have you noticed that at all?
I hope so. I mean, I think that's true. You know, if you don't manage the feelings and fears of your employees, ultimately what you end up doing is managing a bunch of unproductive behaviors. Right? So you better connect to the feelings. You better understand how people are relating to themselves, to you, to the work they have in front of them, to the purpose of that work, to each other, or else I think you end up managing a bunch of ineffective behaviors. And I'd rather go to the heart of the matter, right? Which is some of the feelings and some of the fears.
I'm curious with either use a leader or yourself, but just an example of that shift as people start to pay more attention to their body and overall well-being. I'm going to say even just body well-being. How has that translated in their work?
So leaders who have relationships with their bodies, and this is how I'm going to define relationships with their bodies. Leaders who are continuously physically active, leaders who are rested, leaders who are nourished, leaders who take the time to reflect. Those leaders forge deeper relationships with the people around them, with their stakeholders, with their peers, with their employees. They make more accurate decisions. They express more creativity. They learn more quickly. They feel happier. And it's not only that they feel happier at work, they feel happier at home, right? They show higher health benefits, right? They're sick fewer days out of the year. And, you know, organizations win when leaders are plugged into their bodies. Like I said, the organizations have leaders that are out less often, right? Leaders are less likely to burn out if they're connected to their body and like able to listen to their body and their feelings. They see deeper engagement in their employees. And they also see retention. I mean, there's some flat out benefits, not only for leaders, but for organizations.
So there's a huge ROI when we invest in our bodies.
Yeah. But let's just be honest, right? Like there's a bunch of barriers to doing that. And some of them are systemic. So this is like a wake up call to some organizations as well, right? Like we don't make time to invest in our bodies or even relate to our bodies because organizational norms aren't set up to do that.
The environment's not supporting it.
Right. We've told people not to feel at work. We've told people not to eat, right? Like they take back-to-back calls. We've told them there's no conditions for us to move at work. We're more socially isolated than ever before in terms of seeing our colleagues. So there's a lot of barriers to leveraging our bodies, and those need to be addressed, I think, not only at the individual level, and those are the people we're talking to in this podcast, but also at the system level, the organizational level.
How would you, and we do have many HR people and L&D people who do listen in on the podcast. What might you suggest to both the individuals as well as the people in organizations, whether it's from the HR, L&D, or people who are managing other people or managing large groups? What might you suggest as a first step to creating healthier environments?
I think that normalizing the body and using it as a tool, as the tool for leadership is where we need to start. So I don't know necessarily if my actions, Eileen, are going to be connected to what to do with the system, because I've, as you have, spent most of my life coaching one-on-one with executives. So I can tell you, here's how I get executives into their bodies, right? Movement. Movement. Your body was designed to move, and you know this. But short periods of physical activity have shown to have huge benefits for leadership, right? And short periods meaning 20 minutes. If you can move your body, you're going to perform better. You're going to learn faster. You're going to have more creativity. You're going to have higher social, sort of emotional regulation, greater self-efficacy. I mean, it goes on and on. You're going to sleep better if you move. What we know is the research is showing us that like this little amount of activity creates resource caravans that leaders carry into the next day. So if I move, I sleep better. If I sleep better, I have higher self-efficacy the next day. I have more self-regulation. I have more capacity to listen more deeply to the people around me. So this movement is key to you using your body. You can't be immobilized and be a good leader.
I mean, it's a no-brainer when you think about it in terms of organizations supporting this. And as I think you might know, but I walk with many of my clients. That's how I started my practice over 20 years ago. And my background is in life transitions counseling. That's where my graduate work is. And when you're working with people in transition and change, and they're sitting still, it's overwhelming. It is very hard to get out of your own way. And when you physically move, you can get out of your own way. And your brain starts to open up. I could feel it and see it in clients through moving with them.
Yes, your body is designed to move. Yeah. If you can move in nature, like bonus, right? Yeah. Because we know that moving in nature sort of deactivates our amygdala, the part of our brain that is responsible for fight, flight, and immobilization. So if I can be in nature and walking, my executive function comes back online, right? I see things with more objectivity and possibility. I have more capacity to act with choice versus out of reaction.
So when I think about translating this to organizations, that's one thing that people can start to think about, whether you're a leader who's leading your team or whether you're part of the HR team, to start to encourage, whether it's walking meetings. And those meetings can be done virtually. Most of my clients do not live locally. We put on headsets and we walk together, if you will. And so being able to have those walking meetings or have something that there are goals set around movement and the body can be a great first step, it sounds like.
It's huge. And I think a lot of people have resistance to this because they're like, well, who's going to capture what comes out of the meeting, right? This is what I want to tell you. The research says that when you're moving your body, your brain releases something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. When that is released in your brain, you actually can take what you're learning in a meeting and translate it into wisdom and memory. Mm-hmm. And so like people can come back to their desks and write down the takeaways of what happened during that walking meeting, and nobody loses. We think we're losing, but we're not. We're only winning if we're moving, I think.
It's so funny that you say that. That was one of the first things that people used to always ask me at the very beginning when I would be walking, when I would have a consult and say that that's how I do the work. Well, how do I remember everything? Do I take notes? Can we sit down? And I'd say, you're going to be shocked at how much you'll remember. If you want to bring a note card, you're welcome to, and you could jot down your own notes, have at it. However, my clients never end up taking notes because they remember what's important to them. out of the
That's right.
session.
And I would dare say we would get better at focusing too, which we know also happens through exercise, focusing on the thing that matters from the meeting or the conversation or the interaction, right? And taking action on that versus the minutia.
And being very present focused. When you're sitting in an office, we often are distracted. And whereas
Great
if
point.
you're moving, you're very present, and mindfulness also feeds into that.
I totally agree. So getting into the body, movement, first thing. Second thing is feeling. Like we've got to legitimize feelings at work. They need to not be forbidden anymore, right? They're part of the human experience. They're automatic, they're physical. Leaving them out of decision making and judgment and interaction, like I said earlier, it's not only impossible, it's imprudent. And so we need to give leaders permission to feel. And I mean the highs, the good stuff. And we have so much research around the benefit of positive emotions, and we should talk about that. But also the lows, right? Also the feelings that we don't really permit in ourselves. And my belief is that all feelings should be allowed. It's just that some behaviors associated with them are not, right? Like I can't feel frustrated and then insult you, right? I can't feel, rage and then throw a tantrum in a meeting. So, but when we get leaders in touch with their feelings, when they develop more emotional awareness, they ultimately develop emotional literacy and then emotional regulation. And we see better relationships, better performance, better behavior as a result of that. So I think we really need to also get into our feeling selves. And I love the positive psychology work on positive emotions and the benefit and utility of those, which I think some other guests of yours have talked about.
Yeah, with Barb Fredrickson.
Yes,
Yep.
Exactly. And what that does, when we express positive emotions, there are 10 of them, Eileen, and you know these. But when we express them, we actually build this effect energetically and in our brains that allows us to set aside bias. We become more flexible, more creative. We think differently with other people. We become more inclusive. This broaden and build effect that comes from celebrating, it comes from really expressing positive emotion, which we don't really take time to do in organizational life, has really big benefits.
Yeah, and it physically expands your vision as well.
It does. It physically expands your peripheral vision, so you're able to see more,
right?
Which is just amazing. We know that teams who express positive emotion in like a 3-to-1 ratio, they have more positive emotion than they do negative emotion, instigate this broaden and build effect, and they're more creative. They feel safer to people. They're more innovative. So there's some real big utility to our feelings and expressing positive emotion, which I feel like we've, again, just taken out of organizational life.
Particularly when people are feeling like they're so under the gun, they're running, that's the first thing to go. And it's the thing that we need to bring back in, just like sleep. Those things that we think are disposable are really not. They're things that we must hold on to because it will allow us to be strong and weather the storms.
Yeah. As people are so burned out, there's this new research by Sheldon Cohen and his team that measured positive affect, the expression of positive emotion in people, cheerfulness, gratitude, awe. And when his team put a rhinovirus in people's noses, the people who were high in positive affect got the cold 25% of the time. And the people who were low in positive affect in terms of expressing positive emotion got it 75% of the time. It's huge, irrefutable data around how I feel impacts my immune system, which therefore impacts, my quality of life and how I show up.
I actually was just reading that, I want to say yesterday or the day before. I think it was in Hope Circuit in Martin Seligman's more recent book. It's not
Yeah.
super recent, but he had quoted that again. I know it's in a few different books, but it's every time I read that, I'm like, if this isn't proof of how our bodies respond, what is?
Right. Yeah. So, and that's so clear, right? Like the feelings impact our bodies. Our bodies are our vehicle for leadership, our vehicle for relating to other people, our vehicle for getting anything done. We cannot sort of just disregard our feelings.
Yeah. That's one thing that my dad used to always say. And I kind of think I might have brought this up on another podcast. So for those listeners, you get to hear it a second time. But my dad used to always say is if we don't pay attention to our body will still answer. So
That's right.
you've got to listen because your body will respond. And it is that first response. And so oftentimes we'll get something in our head. We know in our head we shouldn't be doing X, Y, or Z. Or let's say you're in a job that's not the right fit and you stick with it. Your body always keeps score, is what he would also say. And your body will decide, I'm out of here. So
That's
we
totally
get to
true.
listen or not.
That's right. I couldn't say it any better. Your emotions will stay in your body if you don't listen to them, if you don't complete them. And then the body, unfortunately, responds, as you mentioned, by
Yeah.
getting sick, by not being its optimal self.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions. One is before we get to the final of all this, the first one is what do we need to continue doing?
Well, we need to continue eating nutritious food, I think. And by that, I mean whole, real food, plants. We need to continue sleeping and permitting that. And we need to continue moving and being physically active. I think a lot of people do those things, but they don't do them with any attention or intention.
Definitely. What must we stop doing?
Ignoring our body, thinking that it's mechanical. And I think we also need to stop ignoring our feelings.
Well, it makes me think of we're so used to computers. When the computer goes, we get a new computer. We get one body for
We
this
get one
whole
body.
journey. There's no bringing it into the Genius Bar. So we've got to nurture it and nourish it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's one thing to start doing?
We've got to create a body practice. A practice. And it can be anything. You know, we talked about this yesterday in our dress rehearsal. It's breathing on purpose, right? So you develop a breathing practice. It's meditating, it's walking, it's some sort of movement, NET, acupuncture, chiropractic work, massage work, tapping, anything that is a body language instead of just using your head as the primary tool to lead.
What is your favorite body practice of choice?
I think my favorite body practice now, it used to be yoga, but I think my favorite body practice now is hiking. I think it's walking in nature.
Yeah.
Can be done anywhere.
You get that sense of awe, you get the movement, all of it.
Yeah. Right. A bonus if I can do it with my husband. Right now, it's not a total bonus to do it with my 3-year-old, but we're getting there.
Again.
We're working.
Yes.
Yeah, we're working him up to it.
So now the big final question, and this is kind of the what's in it for our listener. What is possible when people become body aware and use that to become a more effective leader?
I think what's possible is healing. And that's a pretty big word.
Wow.
But I think it's physical healing, it's emotional healing, and it's relational healing that can come when people develop more loving relationships with their bodies. Wow. So there's this precept in yoga that I love that says there's no freedom without practice and there's no practice without the body. And I think about that, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't do anything without this. So if we start to cultivate a relationship with it, we have the possibility of healing a lot of things.
If that isn't the most powerful why, I don't know what is. Healing is pretty desirable. And
It's
when
pretty
you're not,
big. Yeah.
in so many areas, it's so applicable to so many areas of our lives.
Well, and I think a lot of your listeners might go like, there's no healing that's being done at work. Or then I ask you to consider actually it's the place that people spend a majority of their waking hours, and they are bringing their trauma with a small t or a big T to work. And so there is healing being done there. People are part of something, they're contributing to something, they're finding themselves, they're either connected or isolated, they're either protected and defended, or they're engaged and evolving. And so I think that there is a lot of healing that's done through work. And I think it's the possibility for big, wakefulness for us.
Well, and we also have to remember that the same person who shows up to work is the person who might have some stuff going on at home. And that might not be the place that they're ready to heal, but they might be able to have some powerful healing at work too. So I think it all feeds each other.
Yes, I think you're right. Like they're taking themselves with them, right? And so their feelings of disconnection, their trauma, whatever it is, their fears, they show up at work. They just show up there differently than how they show up at home, but they're still the same wounds, right? So I think people are constantly working on themselves and growing themselves. And the leaders who listen to this podcast, I know, are interested in evolving. And so I think that that's what's possible if they connect with their bodies.
Yeah, I would agree. Excellent. Now, thinking about one morning ritual that gets you set up on the right track. What is that one ritual?
I mean, this is like set up for me. It's just exercise. I just try to move. I just try to move as quickly as I can, which normally isn't until my kid is with a nanny or off at school, right? But that's the first thing I do to set myself up well.
Yeah, I get it. I do the same. And I can feel it in my body when I haven't done that. So, and in my brain when I haven't done that.
Yeah.
So, favorite book that you've read recently?
Favorite book. I read Good Inside by Dr. Becky Kennedy. It's a book about raising self-regulated, confident, and resilient kids. And she describes resilience. I love her description, so I'm going to send it to you. But she describes it as sort of the ability to experience a wide range of emotions and still feel like ourselves. And, she says, like, what we need to do is help our kids tolerate distress, right? And tolerate things that are challenging and stay in the moment when they're challenging and find their footing and find their goodness and find the learning in it. And I thought, oh my God, that's what my leaders need to do. That's what my leaders are trying to do, right?
Exactly.
So that book, it's a parenting book, but I've found it to be beautiful in terms of some of her strategies for dealing with big emotions and how we help our kids cope with those, and really how we help humans cope with them.
Yeah, I think so many of the parenting books are applicable to us at all stages of life, and particularly if we didn't get that at younger ages. It's never too late.
A lot of us have not really had the permission to feel, right? And so we're coming into this needing to build those chops, those emotional awareness, and then, emotional literacy and emotional regulation skills.
All right. So now we always leave our leaders with three, or our listeners, I should say, who are often leaders, 3 gifts. One is the big takeaway from today that you hope they take with them.
The big takeaway is that please, I guess it's a request, please make time to care for the vessel that enables you to lead. I think, Eileen, you and I know that what people want most from each other is to feel another person's open heart and to feel their quiet mind and their calm presence. And the way to any of those is the body.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. All right. One mindset shift that you hope people have as a result of our time together.
You are more than your mind. So you're going to do your best work if you recruit your physical self and your emotional self.
All right. So taking this from all the stuff that we've just talked about to really practical action, what is one thing that our listeners can do right now to plug and play?
Find a way to take care of your body each day and do it with intention.
This podcast is a catalyst for your leadership and well-being journey. To step deeper into exceptional leadership, visit svchange.com for personalized support that will take you to the next level. If you find this show meaningful, please hit that follow or subscribe button. It helps more people find what's possible organically. If you have questions about anything we've talked about, please drop me a line at podcast@svchange.com. I read every email I get, whether that's an episode idea, a guest recommendation, or just a simple note about how the show has impacted you. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Eileen Schaefer. Thanks for listening. What's Possible is produced by the team at Palm Tree Pod Co. The executive producer is Anthony Palmer. Garrett Wright is associate producer. Thanks to Emily Miles and Caitlin Krings for video and digital support. The content for this podcast is created by Eileen Schaefer and the team at Silicon Valley Change.